gas prices up to a near wartime high, with a record 39 million Americans expected to hit the road this Memorial Day weekend. The national average now stands at $4.56 a gallon. President Trump says, again, he's not thinking about these rising prices.
This is peanuts, and I appreciate everybody putting up with it for a little while. It won't be much longer, but you're going to have, and frankly, there is so much oil out there. One of the things that is happening is these big ships are coming up to Texas, Louisiana, and Alaska, and they're loading up. But I don't even think about that. What I think about is you can't let Iran have a nuclear weapon.
CNN's Matt Egan is with us now. Peanuts, he says.
Yeah, John, look, this is a challenging situation. You've got high demand colliding with low supply. That's never a great combination, and that is why drivers this holiday weekend should be bracing for historically high prices. So Gas Buddy projecting the national average will be $4.48 a gallon on Memorial Day. That would be a 42% increase from last Memorial Day. And in fact, $4.48 a gallon, this would be the second highest on Memorial Day on record. The only time higher was 4 years ago after Russia invaded Ukraine under former President Joe Biden. And this would be miles away from the pre-COVID level, well below $3 a gallon. And look, that $4.48 a gallon forecast from Gas Buddy, that could prove to be optimistic because, as you noted, the AAA forecast is now up to $4.56 a gallon. So that means it is quite possible that Memorial Day could actually be an all-time high. We're going to have to wait and see how this plays out. But of course, this is happening because the unthinkable hasn't just happened. It's been happening for 11 weeks, right? The Strait of Hormuz closed. It has completely destabilized the global energy system. And the longer that it remains closed, the higher the gas prices are going to go. And I know the president dismissed this as peanuts, but Brown University has been tracking in real time the impact to consumers. And they found that higher energy costs are costing Americans $43 billion just since the war started. That's on gas, that's on diesel, and on a per family, per household basis, that works out to $325. That, of course, is hardly peanuts. And what's notable is that the 3 states that are experiencing the biggest price increase over the past year for gasoline are all 3 states that Trump won in 2024. Ohio, Alaska, Michigan, all of them more than $1.60 a gallon more expensive than this time last year. And I talked to a retired mechanic from Illinois, which is the state experiencing the 4th biggest increase over the past year. And he told me that he's living off of Social Security with his wife, and he said these high gas prices are just killing him. He said he wants to go visit his great-granddaughter living a few hours away in northern Illinois, but he feels like he can't because it's just too expensive. So I think this is just another reminder that for people who are living off of a fixed income, for lower income families, high gas prices, it's anything but peanuts. It's all too real.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Ohio, Alaska, and Michigan there all have big Senate races in November as well. I bet you that might come up.
It might.
All right, Matt Egan, thank you very much.
So, Rana, primary races, of course, are one thing, but we're not going to get a true reading of how American voters feel about the top issue of affordability until the midterms. How big a motivator do you expect sky-high gas prices and soaring grocery bills will be come November?
Well, I think they're going to be a really big deal. Just taking the energy piece of that, even if you were to see some kind of a halt to the Iran crisis, in the next few weeks, it takes months, maybe even years for these sorts of supply chain disruptions to work their way through the system. Many analysts think we might see high oil prices and gas prices for as much as 3 years out from now. If you think about oil and gas as the one price that Americans see every day at the pump, most people are driving by a gas station, they're filling up. It's something that really can't be overstated. And then, the number 2 issue is food. These are the 2 things, food and fuel, that people really can't cut out of their budgets. You can say, I'm not going to take a fancy summer vacation. You can say, I'm going to shop at a thrift store, but you really can't not fuel your car and not go to the grocery store. So these things are going to be with us. And I just don't see really any disinflationary pressure on the horizon that would make those prices a lot lower come fall when the midterm voting happens.
Right, and of course, as you mentioned, the Iran war and of course the closure of the Strait of Hormuz is causing these gas prices to rise to historic levels. But even if a deal comes in the next few days, what difference could that make in terms of gas prices and affordability in general?
Not as much as quickly as you would like to see. A gas tanker takes months often to get to its destination, and then for that fuel to be sent to factories, to homes, et cetera. So, we are talking a long-term issue here. If you remember going back to COVID, going back to the war in Ukraine, when it first began, supply chain disruptions happen quickly, but they take a long time to resolve. And I think that that's one of the issues that the president was President Trump was a little bit sanguine about in the beginning when he started the Iran conflict, saying this is going to be over quickly. You're not going to even feel any pain at the pump. Well, people are feeling it, and they're growing angry.
And Rana, we also know, of course, about this $1.8 billion fund paid for by taxpayers available to allies of the president after a DOJ settlement. And there are new terms that now bars the IRS from investigating Donald Trump, his family or businesses. What do you make of it? Will it add to voter frustrations, do you think?
I think so. I mean, to be honest, the sense that the Trump administration, particularly in Trump 2, has been really playing fast and loose with rule of law, with rewarding compatriots, allies, family members, friends, as opposed to, really fair dealing. It's a strong felt sense that the public has. It's a bit of a drip, drip, drip problem. You never know quite when it's going to hit. But I think when you add all these things together, the fact that you have an administration that's clearly playing favorites, may not have to answer for any misdeeds, even perceived misdeeds, that's a big deal. I think that really does stick in voters' craw. And, you can see it in the incredibly low approval ratings across the board for the president, particularly his handling of the economy.
But just how bad is the issue of affordability for the Trump administration, especially when we see President Trump having an extraordinarily high level of influence on the outcome of these primary races and, of course, over the GOP in general?
Well, Rosemary, you're raising a great point. It is true that money still talks in U.S. politics. And you've seen in some of the primary races in Indiana, for example, there was a state primary race recently. Some Indiana senators had stood up to the president and said, we don't want gerrymandering. We want to keep things the way they are. Trump then really fought back against these state senators. This wasn't even a federal primary issue. Quadrupled the amount of money in that particular primary ad campaign and defeated the people that had opposed him. So there's definitely a kind of a sense that do not get on the wrong side of this man. He will make it personal and you will pay. And I think that people understand that. Whether that's going to carry the day in a primary season where there's so much anger and where, again, there's no reason to think the prices are going to go down, I'm skeptical of that. I still think we're going to see a Democratic sweep of the House, possibly even the Senate.
Drivers across the world are already dealing with rising gas prices ahead of the busy summer travel season, and they are about to get hit in another way. The war with Iran may have created conditions for a motor oil supply crunch. Well, now some industry experts are warning of shortages. CNN's Matt Egan has more.
Yeah, this is just the latest shoe to drop in the supply chain turmoil caused by the war in the Middle East. Wholesale prices for motor oil are surging, and some industry executives are warning of an imminent shortage. Here's the problem. Manufacturers are struggling to get their hands on the key raw material used to make motor oil. We're talking about something called Group 3 base oil. Normally it's imported from the Middle East, but that's not happening right now because the Strait of Hormuz remains closed. Not only that, but a key facility producing those base oils was damaged during the war. And some of the backup options, like turning to refineries in South Korea, that's not an option right now either, because those refineries in Asia, they're focused on making as much jet fuel and diesel as they can. They're not focused on base oil. So look, this is a perfect storm for a small but critical part of the global oil market. And I talked to the CEO of the trade group representing independent motor oil and lubricant manufacturers, and she told me it's just a big mess. She said, quote, "We're looking at shortages. I have no doubt in my mind." Now, the main concern is those low viscosity motor oils that are very common in cars on the road today. In particular, the industry is warning of a potential shortage of 0W8, 16, and 20. And that last one is the most important motor oil on the market. It is the go-to oil for newer vehicles. And this supply chain crunch, it's already lifting prices. Wholesale prices for some motor oils are going up 6 times faster than on a normal year. 6 times faster. That's according to Tom Glenn. He's the publisher of an industry publication called Jobbers World. And Glenn told me he's been in the industry since 1979. He said he's never seen anything like this. He said that the magnitude and the frequency of the price increases today are, quote, stunning and unheard of. Now, I reached out to the White House, and a spokesperson says that the president and his team, they did anticipate short-term disruptions to the global energy market, and they are in touch with the industry and the private sector around these concerns. And the Energy Department says that they're ready to take additional action if needed to avoid supply chain disruptions. Now, Tom Glenn, the industry veteran, he told me that he suspects that workarounds will be found here, because it's not like America is going to stop driving cars. For instance, automakers, they could change how often they recommend cars get their oil changed. They could also recommend some suboptimal oils as well for the time being. Of course, there's cost to that as well if it ends up damaging engines. All of this is just another reminder of how fragile global supply chains are and how the war in the Middle East is raising the cost of living here in America.